Tarantino often discusses the relationship between masculinity and race, which is not something that I, as a white person, nor he, as a white person, have any expertise around. I'll refrain from discussing the racial elements of these situations when they do not directly relate to the subject at hand. Please keep in mind that my analysis of these scenes does not in any way constitute or express my political ideologies concerning the source material. This video is purely analytical of Tarantino's writing. The views portrayed are not my own, but his. Also, obviously don't watch this if rape is an issue you do not want to hear discussed in depth. I, of course, won't be showing any scenes that portray rape or sexual assault, but I will speak about them and describe them in reasonable depth. I recently rewatched every single Quentin Tarantino film, and in doing so noticed a motif surrounding his use of rape as an allegory for expressing his opinions on violation, dominance, and masculinity. 3 examples stood out to me from Pulp Fiction, The Hateful Eight, and Inglourious Basterds. In this video, I will attempt to unpack and explain my findings in hopes of getting a better understanding of the messages Tarantino intends for his audience. Let's start with Pulp Fiction. In the gold watch story in Pulp Fiction, Butch must acquire the watch passed down through generations in his family. His journey in doing so is symbolistic of Butch developing the traits of his veteran father and ancestors. After getting the watch, he runs into a crime boss he is on the run from named Marcellus Wallace. The two get into a gunfight, which takes them into a pawn shop. In the pawn shop, a Confederate flag hangs on the wall. The Confederate flag is a hint to the audience that the owners of the shop represent the Confederates. Following this metaphor, Butch and Marcellus Wallace represent the white and black people of America during the Civil War. In a somewhat gratuitous show of Tarantino's lack of sensitivity, Marcellus is raped by one of the store owners, Zed, intending to rape Butch next. If we keep in mind the symbolism of Marcellus representing African Americans during and before the Civil War, and Butch representing white, non-Confederate Americans, it becomes clear that this rape is a symbolistic violation of black people during slavery times, forced into involuntary servitude. The Confederates, personified in Zed, intend to symbolistically violate the North, personified in Butch, next in the Civil War. Before this can happen, however, the North defeated the Confederacy, symbolized here by Butch and Marcellus defeating Zed, and abolished slavery, symbolized by Marcellus's rape being cut short. In symbolizing the North, Butch ultimately resolves his need to be connected and similar to his veteran ancestors. Before the rape, we see that Zed is a racist when he chooses who to assault first with a derogatory slur and rhyme. This is Tarantino outright stating that the obvious motivation for the Confederacy, the Civil War, and slavery was racism, a fact that is ignored constantly within the genre of westerns, a genre that he loves and that inspired him to become a filmmaker. Speaking of westerns, the next example up is from Tarantino's shittiest western so far. In The Hateful Eight, Major Marquis Warren of the United States military has an intense standoff with General Sanford Smithers of the Confederacy. Both want to kill the other, but cannot do so legally unless in self-defense. So, the black Major Marquis begins goading the white General Smithers in hopes of the general making the first move so that he can be killed. Marquis decides to go about this by describing in detail how he tortured and murdered Smithers' son for a bounty. The truthfulness of his story is unclear, but irrelevant. The relevant issue is how Marquis escalates the tale. After explaining that he stripped the son naked and forced him to walk in the freezing cold for hours, he tells Smithers that he forced the son to give him oral sex in exchange for a blanket which he had no intention of providing. He says this not just because rape is a terrible thing to subject someone to, but because he knows that Smithers is a racist. The rape indicates a physical, sexual, and mental domination of the son by Marquis, a black man. Marquis knows that Smithers views him as subhuman, so the domination of Smithers' son is so brutal and offensive to Smithers, not because of the rape alone, but because his son was forced into submission by a perceived inferior. Marquis uses Smithers' warped ideas of race and masculinity to enrage and ultimately outwit him, leading to his perfectly legal death. Whereas the rape in the Gold Watch story was symbolistic of the events of the Civil War, the rape in the Hateful Eight is representative of the view the Confederacy had of black people. Moreover, the overt masculinity stereotypically assigned to black people by racists to diminish the perception of their cognitive ability is intimidating to Smithers and, in Tarantino's view, to the Confederacy as a whole. This is why Smithers is so intent on subjugating and oppressing black people. It is perhaps ironic, therefore, that this fear is what causes Smithers to be killed by a black man who defeated him both physically and emotionally. Moving on from films revolving around the Civil War, let's progress all the way to World War II with Inglourious Basterds. In Inglourious Basterds, theater owner Shoshana Dreyfus is romantically pursued by Nazi veteran and war hero Frederick Zoller, the star of his own biographical propaganda film that portrays his time serving the SS when he killed 250 Allied soldiers over the span of just 3 days. Shoshana is not at all interested in Zoller, but agrees to host the premiere of his film at her theater so that she can burn it down, killing all the Nazis there. During the screening, as Shoshana prepares to burn the theater down, Zoller excuses himself from the film, looking agitated. He interrupts Shoshana, telling her that he is uncomfortable watching himself kill so many people.
Ce film s'inspire de mes exploits militaires. Et en l'occurrence, mes exploits consistent dans le fait que j'ai tué beaucoup d'hommes. Par conséquent, la partie du film projetée maintenant, je n'aime pas regarder cette partie.
While it is very possible that this wrongdoing is genuinely disturbing to him, I find it unlikely. We have seen him brag about his war story and revel in the fame throughout the entirety of the film leading up to this point. I also don't think he's lying to get with Shoshana. He had no reason to pretend to look concerned when she wasn't there. His reasoning becomes apparent to me after Shoshana dismisses him, telling him she is busy.
Je dirais que vous m'avez fait mal.
Ma foi, ça fait plaisir de voir que vous pouvez ressentir quelque chose, même si c'est juste de la douleur physique. Je ne suis pas un homme à qui on dit allez-vous-en. Il y a plus de 300 cadavres en Italie qui, s'ils le pouvaient, en témoigneraient. Après tout ce que j'ai fait pour vous, vous me manquez de respect à vos risques et périls.
His outrage at being denied the woman he wants, as if he has a right to her, is clearly related to the number of people he killed, which he conveniently inflates from 250 to over 300. The implication here is that he intends to rape her. This doesn't happen because she kills him, but it remains clear that his idea of entitlement to her rationalized his monstrous actions, despite him being generally polite and, as oxymoronic as it may sound for a Nazi, kind. This is a man who is not consciously or outwardly evil, but sees himself as virtuous and finds morality within whatever he wants. This is likely due to the bigotry fed to him through propaganda that made him think it was okay to be a Nazi and kill the Allied soldiers. Which brings us back to where we began. Why does he believe he is entitled to Shoshana because of his status as a war hero? I think it's because he sees himself as such a pervasively masculine force, and his warped view of masculinity is bathed in sexuality. In his mass murder of Allied soldiers, he has proven his status as a man, and has established his worthiness for whomever he may choose, and watching those murders reminds him that he doesn't have what he feels he deserves. To the Nazis, Jews are evil and hence need to be killed. To Zoller, women are prizes for masculinity, and hence are the right of the masculine. In Pulp Fiction, The Hateful Eight, and Inglourious Basterds, Tarantino uses rape to show us how bigotry and ignorance can rationalize and normalize atrocities. The Confederacy is in favor of slavery because of their racism. Smithers is offended by his son's death because of his perceived superiority based upon societal expectations of masculinity and racial prejudice, and Zoller feels that he deserves a woman regardless of consent because of how masculinity is portrayed to him in Nazi propaganda, the same thing that moralizes genocide and then informed his life path. While I'm not sure a subject as sensitive as rape should be used as an allegory, Tarantino certainly uses it well. These are the most potent examples, but there are more in Reservoir Dogs, Kill Bill, and Django that I may analyze in the future if the opportunity presents itself. For now, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy.
Hang up the